My SIL kept leaving her kids with me for babysitting despite my packed work schedule. I finally told my brother, and now they're getting divorced. Mike and I have always been close, but I cannot say the same about Emma. When Mike first introduced her to the family, I made an effort to get to know her, but she never showed any real interest in building a relationship with me. Even after their wedding and the birth of their kids, she remained distant. That never bothered me too much. People are different, and not everyone has to be close, but what I do not understand is why she expects help from people she barely puts effort into knowing. Despite keeping her distance from me, she had no problem asking for favors. When she first had the twins, she started calling me up to run errands for her, things like grocery shopping, because she was stuck at home, and Mike was apparently too exhausted from work to do anything. At first, I helped out because I wanted to support my brother. But before long, the list of errands grew longer, and it became clear that this was becoming a regular expectation, not an occasional favor. So, I had to start saying no. Recently, things took an even worse turn. Emma began dropping the twins off at my place every single day for me to babysit while she went about her day. I watched them for 3 days straight, thinking she just needed temporary help. But on the 4th day, I told her I had work and could not babysit. Instead of understanding, she brushed it off and told me it would be good practice for when I have kids of my own. She also pointed out that since I worked from home, it should not be a big deal. Yes, I do work from home, but it is still a job. It is not free time. Working remotely does not mean I am sitting around waiting for tasks to fall into my lap. I have deadlines, responsibilities, and meetings just like anyone working in an office. Keeping an eye on twin toddlers while trying to focus on my job is just not possible. I had already told Emma this before, on the very first day. But she came up with an excuse. She absolutely had to go visit her mother, who was sick, and she had no one else to watch the kids. Mike did not trust babysitters, so she was out of options. She swore she would only be gone for a few hours. That was a lie. She left for nearly 6 hours. By the time she came back, I had reached my limit. I told her that I had done her a favor this one time, but she needed to find another solution. Either she could hire a babysitter or ask Mike to work from home to watch his own kids, but I was not going to do both jobs at once. Instead of apologizing or understanding, Emma started lecturing me. She went on about how I was their aunt and that it was my duty to step up when they needed help because that is what family is for. She told me that her mother was very ill, her brother was out of state and would not be back for 2 more days, and I was the only person Mike would trust with the kids. She also reminded me that my brother was under a lot of pressure at work. He was working overtime, trying to get a promotion, and I should not do anything to disturb him. She insisted that our arrangement needed to stay between us and that I should just help her out for a little longer. And she wore me down. I agreed. For the next 2 days, I worked while watching the twins, which was completely exhausting. Meanwhile, Emma took her time, never coming back when she said she would. By the 4th day, I was looking forward to having my time back. Emma's brother was finally coming home, so she no longer had a reason to leave the kids with me. I woke up relieved, thinking my babysitting days were over. Then, right on schedule, Emma showed up at my doorstep. This time, she said she needed to run some errands and would be back in a jiffy. I knew from experience that a jiffy meant at least 2 hours, probably more. I tried to stop her, but she was in such a rush that she did not even listen. She walked in, set the twins down on my couch, and ran back out before I could get a word in. That was it. I was done. I sent her a message, telling her exactly how unfair this was. I reminded her that I worked 50 hours a week, and she had essentially added another job on top of that without even asking. The least she could do was be honest instead of tricking me into watching her kids. Instead of apologizing, she doubled down. She told me I owed this to her and Mike because we were family. That was when I snapped. I took screenshots of our conversation, along with pictures of the twins sitting in my living room, and sent everything to my brother. I explained what had been happening, how Emma had been dumping her kids on me like I was a free daycare service, and how I could not keep doing this every day. Do not get me wrong, I love my nephews. They are amazing kids. But I am not their mother, and I never agreed to this arrangement. It was not fair to me. 15 minutes later, Mike replied. He apologized for what I had been dealing with and told me he was on his way to pick them up. At that moment, I started to feel a little guilty. Emma had told me how stressed Mike was with work, and I worried that I had just added more pressure to his life. So, I tried to tell him I could watch them just for that day, but he refused. He was coming no matter what. When he arrived, he looked furious. He barely spoke, just thanked me for my patience, apologized, and left with the kids. The look on his face made me feel worse. I thought he was upset with me for refusing to help. But 3 days later, I found out the truth. Mike had filed for divorce. Not only that, but he was also demanding full custody of the kids, leaving Emma with only visitation rights. My parents were the ones who told me, but even they did not know why. They only found out because Emma's parents had called them, completely devastated by what was happening. The moment I heard, I called Mike. I needed to know what had happened. This was a man who had always been deeply in love with his wife. For him to make a move this drastic, it did not add up. When I got to his house, Emma was gone. She had packed up and left the same night he took the kids from my place. That was when he told me everything. This had not started with me. For months, Emma had been dumping the kids on other people too. She would leave them with random relatives, whoever she could get to watch them, so she could go about her day. Before me, it had been a third cousin who lived nearby, but she eventually moved away. Mike had no idea this was happening until after that cousin moved. He only found out because the cousin made a joke about how Emma would have to find a new babysitter. That was when he confronted her, and they had their first huge fight. Emma's excuse? She was not ready to send the kids to daycare yet, and she did not trust full-time nannies. But somehow, she did trust a distant cousin she barely knew? Mike had tried to compromise. He told her that if she needed to go somewhere, she should call him so he could come home and watch the kids. She agreed. But she did not keep her word. A few weeks later, she started leaving the kids with me, lying about why she needed help, disappearing for hours, and letting me handle everything. And the worst part? Her mother was never sick. She had been out with her friends the whole time. One of Emma's friends was getting married, and instead of being home with her kids, she had spent every single day helping plan the wedding while I got stuck taking care of her toddlers. When I found out the truth, I was furious. I had been helping because I thought she was dealing with a real emergency, but she had been lying the entire time. She had been using my kindness as a free pass to dump her responsibilities onto me while she went out and had fun. I wanted to call her right then and there and tell her exactly what I thought of her, but somehow, I held back. Mike told me later that when I texted him about what was going on, he completely lost it. Emma had promised him she would not do this anymore, but she had broken that promise without a second thought. During their argument, she told him she did not understand why he was upset. He was the one who said he did not trust babysitters, and I was not a stranger, I was his sister. He knew me and trusted me, so what was the problem? Mike had to break it down for her like she was a child. Just because I was his sister did not mean I was automatically available to watch their kids. I had a full-time job, and I was not a stay-at-home spouse with free time. I had my own responsibilities. Her logic made even less sense when I found out that before me, she had been leaving the kids with a distant cousin she barely knew. This woman was not close to Emma or Mike, yet Emma had no problem trusting her with the twins. The final blow happened during that argument. Mike, frustrated, told her that she acted like she did not even want to be a mother. That was when she snapped. She yelled at him, saying that no, she really did not want to be a mother. She told him that if she had known having children would mean she could not have fun anymore, she never would have had them in the first place. And then she walked out. That was all Mike needed to hear. The next morning, he filed for divorce and demanded full custody. When I heard all of this, I was stunned. I had always known that Emma was immature and irresponsible, but I had assumed that marriage and children would eventually make her grow up. Instead, she had treated motherhood like an inconvenience, something she had been forced into and wanted no part of. Mike was devastated, not just because of the divorce, but because Emma was still fighting for custody. Even though she had outright admitted that she did not want to be a mother, she was refusing to let go of the kids. She had not even responded to the legal notice yet, but she was furious, and her parents were making things worse. They had been harassing Mike nonstop, trying to pressure him into backing down. I did my best to comfort him. I told him things would work out in the end, even though I was not completely sure myself. When I got home, my parents called me. They had been trying to get in touch with Mike, but he had been ignoring their calls, so now they wanted answers from me. At first, I told them they needed to talk to Mike themselves. It was not my place to share his personal business. But they kept pushing. They would not let it go. So, eventually, I gave in. I told them everything. That was a mistake. The second I finished, they did a complete turnaround. Instead of blaming Emma for everything that had happened, they started blaming me. They told me that if I had just kept my mouth shut and stayed home with the kids that day instead of involving Mike, none of this would have happened. I could not believe what I was hearing. Instead of holding Emma accountable for her lies and her neglect, they were blaming me for exposing the truth. I got into a huge argument with them, but they would not listen. They insisted that I should have thought things through before running to Mike and that I needed to apologize to Emma and her family for causing so much trouble. As if Emma had not been the one who created this mess. As if she had any intention of fixing things herself. I knew exactly why my parents were acting this way. It was because they were friends with Emma's parents, and they did not want to ruin that relationship. Emma's family was wealthy and influential, the kind of people my parents loved to associate with. When Mike first brought Emma home, they were thrilled. If the marriage worked out, it meant access to an exclusive social circle they would never be a part of otherwise. But now, everything was falling apart, and instead of supporting their own son, they were more worried about how it would affect them. The fact that they cared more about appearances than their own family made me lose any remaining respect I had for them. I hung up on them. Since then, I have not spoken to them. But they have not stopped. They keep sending me messages, blaming me for everything. I have not blocked them. A part of me still loves them, even if I do not like them anymore. I want to talk to Mike about this. I usually go to him for advice, but I know he already has too much on his plate. The last thing I want is to add to his stress. So now, here I am. Am I the bad person for telling my brother the truth about his wife instead of staying quiet and letting her keep dumping her kids on me? 1 week later. It has been a week since everything happened, and Mike has been completely focused on the legal process. Emma is not contesting the divorce, but she is still fighting for joint custody. It does not make any sense. She never wanted to be a mother. She said it herself. I do not believe for a second that she has suddenly changed her mind. The more I think about it, the more I realize Emma has always been this way. She grew up as the only daughter of extremely wealthy parents, and they spoiled her rotten. She never had to take responsibility for anything in her life. I am not saying every rich kid turns out like this, but Emma sure did. My parents have known her family since we were little. Their mothers went to the same college, so they saw each other occasionally at reunions, but they were not particularly close. That only changed when Mike started dating Emma. Emma never really grew up. She acted like she was still a carefree teenager, even after she got married and had children. And that is probably the biggest reason I never liked her. I do not know what Mike ever saw in her, but at least he is finally getting out of this mess. She has made it clear that she will always put herself before her children. That is dangerous. Mike is just lucky that before me, she left the kids with someone who was stable and responsible. If I had not stepped in, who knows who she would have dumped them on next. She does not even seem to realize how reckless she has been. The only reason she is even fighting for custody is because of her parents. They still want access to their grandchildren, and they hate how this whole thing looks. As for my own parents, they have not reached out again. A few days ago, I made it very clear that I was never going to apologize to Emma or her family because I have nothing to be sorry for. If they want to cut me off because I helped my brother protect his kids from a neglectful mother, then so be it. It says more about them than it does about me. 2 weeks later. I finally talked to my brother today after almost 2 weeks. We had been in touch a few times, but only for brief conversations about the custody battle. Things had been going relatively well for him, which was a relief, but now I had my own problem to deal with. Emma's parents had started harassing me. I am almost certain that my own parents gave them my contact information and address, because last night, Emma's mother showed up at my door unannounced. She was desperate. She told me I was the only person who could convince Mike to agree to joint custody. At first, I was willing to hear her out. She seemed genuinely upset, and for a brief moment, I thought she might be coming from a place of concern for her grandchildren. Then she kept talking. She told me that this whole situation had been devastating for her, her husband, and most importantly, Emma. She said the divorce was bad enough, but if Emma lost custody, it would absolutely crush her. I expected her to talk about how much Emma loved her kids, how much they needed their mother, or how losing them would be heartbreaking for her. But that was not what she said at all. Instead, she told me that they were terrified of what people would think if Emma lost custody. They did not want to be embarrassed. They could not handle being the talk of the town. That was when I knew this conversation was a waste of time. They did not care about the kids. They did not care about Mike. They did not even care about Emma in the way that parents should care about their daughter. They just cared about appearances. That was my breaking point. I told her I would talk to my brother about it, but I had no intention of doing any such thing. I just wanted her to leave. The next morning, I went to Mike's house and told him everything. He did not even seem surprised, just tired. He already knew Emma was more worried about her reputation than her own children. This just confirmed it. Everything made sense now. Emma was not fighting for joint custody because she suddenly wanted to be a mother. She was doing it because she did not want to be seen as a failure. She did not want people whispering about how she was an unfit mother who lost her kids. It was not about love. It was about saving face. The twins had been staying with Mike full-time, and he was doing everything he could to make sure they were taken care of. Sometimes, he asked me to babysit, and I was always happy to help when I could. If I was busy, he had a few trusted friends who helped him out when needed. He had not found a daycare or nanny yet, but that would come once the custody battle was over. I hoped the court would see things for what they were and grant him full custody. Emma was not ready to be a mother. She had not been ready when they were born, and she still was not ready now. Maybe someday she would be. But that day was not today. And as long as she lived under her parents' roof, she probably never would be. Looking at her mother, it was easy to see where she got it from. The apple did not fall far from the tree. 7 months later. It has been almost 7 months since all of this started, and as of today, it is official. Mike has full custody of his twins. He won the case 2 months ago, and his divorce was finalized last week. He is free. And I have never been happier for him. Just like I predicted, Emma's parents cut my parents off the second she lost custody. But instead of owning up to their mistakes, my parents tried a different approach. They did not come running back to us immediately. No, they tried to be sneaky about it. We only found out because my aunt called me, saying my mother was devastated. Apparently, she had been complaining that neither Mike nor I would speak to her, and Emma's parents had stopped returning her calls as well. She was not heartbroken about what happened. She was upset because she was alone. We both knew exactly what was going on. It was an attempt to make us feel guilty, to lure us back in. But it was not going to work. If my parents wanted us back in their lives, they would have to do it the right way. They would have to own up to everything they did and apologize. If they could not do that, then we were better off without them. At the end of the day, Mike is happy. I am happy. And that is all that matters.